All right, so today I want to start by talking about this tweet from Paul Hinman. He says Alberta won't accept federal quarantine sites. Healthcare is an exclusive provincial jurisdiction, and Albertans will not be locked up as part of Trudeau's response to the you know what. Kenny must immediately stop this federal intrusion and tell Ottawa to stand down. Now, again, there's all of these reports of quarantine sites being set up in the provinces, and it's a very scary precedent because number one, it's completely unnecessary to begin with. And like I've mentioned before, like anybody still overly worried, worried about this whole pandemic, if you even want to call it that, anything more than to a slight degree is absolutely insane. And again, I don't mean to be mean to people, but again, we're like I've mentioned before, we're past the point of being worried about offending people because we got massive unemployment right now, and we've got so many problems. It's not even funny. We got businesses shutting down that'll probably never start back up again. So like I said, we're past the point of being nice with people, and this is the big problem that a lot of these people genuinely they don't think there's a downside to these restrictions that are put in. Like they genuinely don't think that. And the levels of ignorance you need to believe that is off the charts, but there's a lot of people that actually believe that. And then you have stuff like this. And this is exactly why I don't support any of these restrictions, whether it's masks, lockdowns, social distancing. I don't care what it is. Maybe restrictions when it comes to nursing homes, maybe. But other than that, I don't support any of it. And the reason why isn't that I don't think that some of these, I don't think masks do anything. Social distancing is also pseudoscience. Closing down businesses is just stupid. But I think that there's some things like, restrictions when it comes to nursing homes that can make sense. The reason why I say I don't want to support any of these kind of things is that the people implementing said restrictions have made it very clear that they will never admit they're wrong if they make a bad decision. And it's like I mentioned too, an easy way whether or not you should trust people is, do they have anything personally at stake if they make bad suggestions, right? Like, does Tam lose her job if she makes a bad decision, or does she get a pay cut? Does any of these, does Doug Ford lose money? Does he forced to call an election if they make bad decisions? No, they're not. These people don't have anything at stake personally. And if you don't have anything at stake personally, I don't believe, I don't, and I think you're insane to suggest otherwise. I don't believe that you can objectively make good decisions. I don't believe that that's the case. Because if these people had something personally at stake, I think it's entirely a lot more reasonable to suggest that they would be making better decisions. For the simple reason being that if they had something personally at stake, they would really, really think twice about the suggestions they were making. I don't believe that they would have suggested mandating masks. I don't think they would have called for social distancing and all this kind of stuff. Like, they wouldn't have done it because they knew there wasn't evidence to, or at the very least, the evidence was very, very flimsy that pointed toward mask mandates and lockdowns. They knew that because at the start of this whole thing, they said it wasn't a good idea. They said don't wear masks. They said don't close the borders. Now it's you should have to wear a mask damn near 24/7, and we can never open up the borders again. We can never open up the border. And not only that, provincial borders are closed in a lot of these cases, and people think that you still shouldn't be able to do it, right? So again, this is why I don't trust any of these people, and you shouldn't either. Like, you shouldn't either. The only way that I will trust someone, and again, I don't care what side of the aisle they're on. I've been. You can't really claim that I'm. And no one can claim that I'm biased because I've been heavily critical of Doug Ford and to a lesser degree, Jason Kenney and all their minions. So again, I don't care what it is. If you don't have a personal stake in this, I don't trust you. And here's the reason why: is that like people like me and most of the people watching, we have stuff at stake. I lost my job. Most people lost their job. They lost out on money. They lost out on their livelihoods. Do we get that back? No. Do we get compensated for that? No. And like I say too, like if anything, these people that work for the government, they benefit for making the wrong decision. Like, do you actually think that, I mean, Teresa Tam gets to get up there on TV every day and, look like the big star, and Patty Haydu and all these, Hinshaw in Alberta, and I don't remember what the person's name in Ontario are. I remember what they look like. They're always up there with Doug Ford, but nonetheless, like, if anything, these people benefit. They get to go up on TV every day. Probably easier for them to get a promotion down the road. That, oh, I was on TV every day and I was, all hip and mighty, right? So again, this is why I don't trust any of these kind of people. And yeah, Jason Kenney is. You have to give it to them. They've definitely done a better job in these other provinces. They have committed to not relocking down. But again, there's still mask mandates in Edmonton and Calgary that have clearly done nothing. I mean, I don't believe Vancouver has as stringent as of mask mandates as Edmonton and Calgary do, and yet Vancouver has less cases, and the cases have gone up, especially in Edmonton, since the mask mandates. So again, the Kenney government should absolutely be pushing back more. I understand why they're not, because they know that all the paranoid Karens would go berserk on them even more than they already are. So I kind of understand that. But again, they still should be pushing back more, especially against stuff like this, because this is stuff that's straight out of a communist or a fascist country, and I really don't see how anybody can support this kind of stuff. If you support this kind of stuff, you are insane. I don't care who you are. You are insane. So next thing to talk about is from Dan Solomon here, and yeah, this is stuff that again, like I've talked about, that um, he says modern day slavery in the Congo, big European corporation behind it, and they say, I mean, I'm not going to play the video, but you can go check it out if you want. 40,000 children work in cobalt mines in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Now, again, there's two aspects to bring up here. Number one is, where is BLM? Again, we care about Black lives. No, if you cared about Black lives, this would be one of the biggest things that they would be worried about. But since they're silent on this kind of stuff, I don't trust them, and I'll never support them until this should be way bigger of an issue than the 10 to 15 unarmed blacks that are killed by cops every year. A lot of those aren't even innocent. Again, so are the hundreds of I believe the number may even be the millions of black people that are still enslaved to this day. More blacks are enslaved to this day than were ever enslaved in the States. More people are enslaved in China to this day than were ever enslaved in the States, back in the 17, 1800s. Why aren't people talking about that more? Well, the reason is that they don't actually care about slavery. They only care about slavery and racism when they can spin it to benefit them politically, right? If they can, it's the same thing with critical race theory. Critical race theory is basically just neo-Marxism. The reason they care about it, like I say, because they can push Marxism. That's why they care about it. So again, BLM should be all over this, and given they're not, that's just more credibility lost amongst them. The other thing to bring up too is a lot of this kind of stuff is used for the whole electric car thing, in that there's a lot of shady stuff that goes on when it comes to mining the materials needed for electric cars and solar panels as well. So again, people think that electric cars and solar panels are so great. Well, no, they're really not. They're really not. There's a lot of shady, unethical stuff that goes into them that people absolutely should be concerned about. So anyway, the next thing to bring up is from the Rebel News here, and they say Police Chief Gerard Berkshire has been forced to resign after his wife posted pro Donald Trump comments on Facebook. Now, again, there may have been more to this story, and if there was, I understand that, and I would admit that I'm wrong. But from what I'm seeing, this is simply an example of just massive political bias and hypocrisy. And the reason I wanted to talk about this is, I mean, this is something I've brought up a million times, it seems, that if the right, and I wouldn't even say the right, a better way of putting it is people who aren't hard left, if people don't start pushing back against this kind of stuff, it's only going to get worse. We've already seen multiple of these far lefties killing Trump supporters, and with very little outrage, at least relative to what it should be. I mean, you look at what happened in Charlottesville. One far right crazy individual killed someone, and it was this big, massive story. But yet Antifa's killed multiple people. Has it been nearly as big of a story? No. Um, this is the thing. Like, far right groups are not going around, harassing, assaulting, even sometimes killing political opponents. The left and the CBC and all these idiots would have you think that, but it's not the case. Like, the Proud Boys aren't doing it. I mean, the KKK basically doesn't even exist anymore. Like, name a right wing group that is going around and rioting, looting, showing up to people's houses who disagree with them politically, harassing people. Like, where is it? I mean, it probably happens to some degree, but Antifa and BLM is hundreds of times worse, way worse. It's not even close. And until people start talking about this and coming clean and just admitting the truth, like, I mean, again, I'm not big on being partisan or either side. But again, you have to call a spade a spade. Like, people need to wake the you know what up, because this only gets worse. Like, the more people stay, if there's a problem in your life and you stay silent, you do nothing, what usually happens? What gets worse? It doesn't. Being silent doesn't make problems go away. And this is the big problem in society, that the average person thinks that, ooh, the right is more of a threat than the left, and it's not even close. It's the left is a way bigger threat, for the simple reason that whenever the left does crazy stuff, they get let off the hook. They get let off the, like, just imagine, just imagine if someone got fired for posting pro Justin Trudeau stuff. It would have been the biggest. CBC would have been all over it. It would have been, they would have all of a sudden stopped caring about the whole virus situation and talked about that all day. But when it happens in the reverse, no one cares. Like, no one cares, and people need to start caring. And the problem is that, um, a lot of the centrists and the libertarian types, they're too proud to do it. Oh, I'm if you're a centrist, oh, I'm neither a Republican or a Democrat, so they stay silent. Or if you're a libertarian, like, this is the big problem with the libertarians too, is that they're the kind of people, not all of them, but a lot of them are kind of people that, oh, the government says, yeah, you know what, we're just gonna censor any libertarian opinion on social media, automatically censor it. We're not going to give you First Amendment rights. You're not going to be allowed to protest. They're like, oh, they're private companies. They can do. Again, this is the big problem, that, yeah, that's not what technically you should be for. But if you allow yourself to be regulated, if you allow stuff like this to go on, it's only going to get worse. If people are starting to be forced to resign for simply supporting someone politically that's a mainstream candidate, what's going to happen next? Well, violence is going to happen next, because when you justify this, people don't say, "Yep, we've gone this far. That's as far as we want to go." People always push it as far as they possibly can until there's blowback. And if you allow things to be pushed too far, the bigger the blowback gets, right? The bigger if you stamp it out early, there'll be very little blowback. If you allow it to fester and to fester and to fester, eventually you piss off the wrong person, and 10, 100 people get killed, maybe more. I don't want that. I don't think anyone should want that, but it's inevitable if they allow this kind of stuff. So anyway, the last thing to bring up here is, um, Gopher shoot leads to heavily armed RCMP takedown at family Strathmore Farm. Story out of the Calgary Sun. And Lone Stubble Jumper says here, RCMP can't be bothered to open rail blockades or crack down on rural crime, but they know how to take down a gopher shooter. Alberta should have its own police force. Gopher shoot leads to heavily armed RCMP takedown at family Strathmore Farm. Now, there may have been more to this story, but I highly doubt it. My guess is that, and here's the thing, I don't know what the news story says. I didn't read the news story, partially because I don't really trust the news. And the other thing being, too, is what someone thinks is a lot of times different than what the reality is. If you have some crazy anti gun neighbor, who knows what they're willing to say to do this kind of. They may have been, oh, they're shooting at me, they're pointing guns at me, or any of this garbage, and when in reality they're just shooting at gophers. So again, they may have been doing something kind of, technically illegal, but is stupid, like, driving through a field and, shooting out of the back of a truck or something like that, which is, again, technically illegal, but it's kind of a stupid law, and you're not actually hurting anyone in any way, shape, or form. But nonetheless, like he says, we have much worse stuff going on. We have rural crime is through the roof. I think it's kind of slowed down a little bit as of late, but we're not worried about that. But we're worried about gopher shoots, right? We're worried about the gopher shoots, right? Maybe it was some high school kids who technically they're not supposed to have guns, but they got a couple 22s. Like, what are they gonna do, right? It's stupid. You give them the warning, and go about your way. Again, just pure insanity. Here's the thing: it's the same stuff you see in the UK, right? And I mean, we see this to some degree in Canada as well. You have police showing up to people's houses for posting, mean stuff on Facebook, but you have, grooming gangs that are, sexually assaulting thousands of girls, and the police could care less about that because that would be racist to crack down on them. But like I say, they'll show up to your house if you post something offensive on Facebook, right? Like, this is where we're at in the West, that if you misgender someone, ooh, yeah, that's going to get you in a ton of hot water. But God forbid I don't know exactly, like I say, what the story was here, but God forbid be a high school kid who wants to go out with your friends and shoot some gophers with a 22. Like, come on. Or you shoot out of the back of a truck or something like that. That like I say, technically you're not supposed to be doing, but it's a harmless thing. Like, it's not like you're taking a handgun or an AR-15 out there and you're shooting gophers, which is a lot more illegal. So anyway, yeah, that's the last thing I wanted to bring up. So anyway, if you liked the video, make sure you hit that like and subscribe if you haven't already. Make sure you follow me on Twitter, especially, but also BitChute and Parler. All those links are in the description, so you can find them all there.